Breaking news. They're coming for the kids. We're coming for them! Sisters broken badges flashing in the night. Knock down doors, no warrant, no right. Take the children, tear the families apart. Hide behind protection while you rip out the heart. Files fabricated, lies on the stand. Judges in their pocket, money changing hands. Parents screaming, cameras never show. The real abuse happens when the CPS shows. Scott ever standing, fighting Tennessee DCS. For separation, they tore the family from his chest. Placed on a registry, no charges, no crime. Blount County DCS crossing every line. Evers versus the state, lawsuit in federal court. Exposing the corruption, tearing that system apart. Years of battle, justice delayed, but not denied. A father's resolve with truth on his side. No mercy, no justice, just power unchecked. We expose the corruption, put them under the rack. Got it for CPS. We won't stop, we won't rest. Breaking news every day. Truth cuts like a blade. Got it for CPS. Your empire's gonna fall. We fight for the families. We fight for the free. CPS. Your time is over. You'll see. Another case buried, another life destroyed. Numbers manipulated, stories over deployed. They call it protection, we call it abduction. State-sponsored kidnapping, legal corruption. Parents labeled unfit for daring to speak. Question the system and they label you weak. We document every raid, every lie, every theft. The resistance is growing, no more silent regret. No mercy, no justice, just power unchecked. We expose the corruption, put them under the rack. Got it for CPS. We won't stop, we won't rest. Breaking news every day. Truth cuts like a blade. Got it for CPS. Your empire's gonna fade. We fight for the families. We fight for the free. CPS. Your time is over. You'll see. You took the innocent. You destroyed the home. Oh, now the people are waking. And we're coming for your throne. No more silence. No more fear. The revolution starts right here. Got it for CPS. We won't stop, we won't rest. Breaking news every single day. Got it for CPS. Your kingdom's gonna break for every parent, for every child set free. CPS, we're gunning for thee. This is the podcast, Gunning for CPS, hosted by Scott Evers. Relentless in his fight, Evers versus Tennessee DCS. A father who refuses to yield, exposing every injustice, demanding accountability, reclaiming what was taken. The battle continues. Stay vigilant. The truth is our weapon.
I'm gonna pull the whole thing down. I'm gonna bring the whole fucking diseased, corrupt temple down on your head. It's gotta be biblical.
The system has fallen. Blount County CPS. Your reckoning has arrived! more lies. Gunner rivers rising from the ashes of deceit. Blount County CPS, your lies have lost their heat. Stormed in without warrant, ripped the family apart. Branded an innocent man, tried to shatter his heart. Fabricated reports, registry of shame. No charges, no trial, just a corrupt game. Now the federal court is watching every crooked move. The hunter becomes the hunted, your empire will lose. Feel the ground shake, hear the thunder roll. The truth is a weapon and it's claiming its toll. This is the reckoning. Gunner Evans bringing the storm. Blount County CPS, your reign is torn. The reckoning. Justice screams your name in fire. For every stolen child, for every broken empire. The reckoning is here. Burn higher. Years of separation, pain they try to hide. Your gunner stands unbreakable, fueled by righteous pride. Blount County DCS crossed the final line. Now the lawsuit strikes like lightning, exposing every crime. No mercy for tyrants hiding behind the state. The people are awake and they seal your fate. Power you abuse will crumble into dust. The Father's war is raging, injustice we trust. Feel the ground shake, hear the thunder roll. The truth is a weapon and it's claiming its toll. This is the reckoning. Gunner Evans bringing the storm. Blount County CPS, your reign is torn. The reckoning. Justice screams your name in fire. For every stolen child, for every broken empire. The reckoning is here. Burn higher. You took the innocent. You destroyed the home. Now the reckoning rises. And you stand alone. No more lies. No more chains. Gonna ever sway. Break the chains. Break the chains. Break the chains. This is the reckoning. Gunner Evans leads the fight. Blount County CPS, disappearing from sight. The reckoning. Your kingdom falls tonight. For every parent rising, for every child set free. The reckoning is here. Victory. Gunner Evans, still standing tall. Blount County CPS, the reckoning has only just begun. The truth cannot be silenced. Justice will be done.
My fellow American citizens, I'm grateful to the motion picture industry for this opportunity to remind you of a most important day in our lives. December 15th is Bill of Rights Day. The Bill of Rights are the first 10 amendments to the American Constitution. After the Constitution was written, it was felt that while this was an extraordinary document, it did not provide the kind of guarantees for our individual liberties that a free country required. And therefore, under the leadership of James Madison, the first 10 amendments were adopted to the Constitution. We call them the Bill of Rights. They are the most extraordinary and detailed guarantees of individual liberty that any people on earth now possess. Because of the first 10 amendments to the Constitution, because of the Bill of Rights, we are guaranteed freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of the press, the right of assembly and petition, the right of trial by jury, the right to be secure in one's own home, the protection of due process of law and private property in public trials, and many other things that perhaps we take for granted, but which we are guaranteed in the United States Constitution.
Well, who are we going to piss off today? Good evening, guys. This is Gunner, your host of Gunning for CPS. Welcome to another edition, weekly edition, as we have here usually every Sunday at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we go over everything from your constitutional rights to educating you about the court processes, as well as exposing mass corruption that is happening across our country and our court systems, as well as through law enforcement and such forth. You'll have to forgive me. We're still trying to work out some lighting. I believe that. Let me know in the comments if you guys are watching if the lighting is much better than it has been in previous episodes, because the light was like kind of like, right here. So this is a little bit softer, but some great feedback from you guys would be awesome. Looking forward to educating you on this special edition that we're going to take and go over. We're actually going to cover the rumor that has been recently going around, and I know a lot of you guys have heard it. Well, there's judicial immunity. There's judicial immunity. No, this is a falsehood perpetrated by the American Bar Association, by the judicial branches, and so on and so forth. There is no such thing as immunity. There is no such thing as immunity. And we're going to go over that. One, if you make this argument, you have got to back it up. You have got to articulate it. One, this is a judge-made doctrine. What does that mean, Gunner? That means a bunch of judges got together and said, hey, we're immune. That doesn't work it that way. Matter of fact, you go forward and challenge and say, where is that found in the Constitution? There's judicial immunity. It doesn't exist. I'll tell you what, go right to the section of 1983 of the U.S. Constitution and prove to me that there is such a thing as judicial immunity. It cannot be found, and it is made up. Now, people say, well, they'll still do it. Well, see, this is where you guys are going to have to learn how to fight and fight better. But you're going to have to go over a few things that, if we want to live free, and there's this guy, once again, I bring stuff to you guys too. If you guys don't follow some of these creators, whether it's on TikTok or Facebook or this, that, I encourage you. They have a ton of great information. But let me put it to you this way. I'm going to share this video with you just real shortly. And if you guys want to have this person you're watching, it's called the 10th Amendment Center. Guy is completely awesome. But watch this video right here.
Our rights, whether the government likes it or not. Samuel Adams was right. The only way to truly be free is for we, the people, to learn how to exercise our rights, whether the government likes it or not. He said, all might be free if they valued freedom and defended it as they ought. Samuel.
There it is, guys. One of our actual framers of the Constitution, founders of the country, Samuel Adams. Matter of fact, yes. A lot of people know it more by the beer. If we don't exercise our rights and learn our rights, and it's kind of like a muscle. is the easiest way. If we don't exercise our constitutional rights constantly, in other words, challenging the authority and the government to keep them in check, then those rights tend to erode or go away. Now, this was also foretold in the Declaration of Independence, to where people will exchange their freedoms for comfort until it becomes tyrannical, which it will. And they had enough intelligence, even from that day, that we seem to not have so much today, is the fact that they knew this was going to happen because they've seen it happen over and over and over again. Oh, we're going to make change. We're going to reform. And it's not working. And it's a huge problem, because when it's not working, and it tells us right away, if this is not working, why do it? And if you look at CPS and the family court systems from what they're supposed to do, not the money side, but the people side, such as the children, it's going to blow your damn mind. I mean, it's what it comes down to. Because if you guys follow me on Facebook, yeah, it will blow your mind. Now, there's a couple things that blew up this week as far as some of the things I posted. And I know some people don't always agree with me, or don't always, get to that point of a lot of things. But earlier, it might have been on TikTok, actually, put you going down this method of looking at the bar graph of how this is connected, all the way from showing the pattern from adoption all the way to girls being, and you guys can follow me on TikTok, same thing on the channel. I think I posted it up there, and you look through some of that, and there's a graph. And girls that were under the age of 18 that were pregnant was something like 50%, 47% or something like that. Then you go into the thing of how many commit crimes and do this, and it's up here 60, 70. And then it looked over here at the amount that went into the prison system. You talk about fast tracking into the prison system. That number was like 70, 80%. And like I said, the graph, and that came straight from, and the disclaimer is right at the damn bottom where it comes from. Come on, guys. This is what they're doing is basically saying, here, let me put kids from the adoption process or through CPS, and how we're doing so good. We're doing so good. Not only do we take and rob you the first time of your children, your heritage, and everything else, once those kids are in the system, they end up right back in the prisons, making them even more money. This is a cycle. And they're not even hiding it. It's right out there. But if we don't take and do something and stand up and exercise our rights, well, we've got to have a different attitude. And like I said, I'm going to go back to this 10th Amendment Center and this guy that I've been, like I said, I've been following him for quite a while. And he's got this other one here, and I'm going to share this one with you. Here, listen.
If the people refuse to protect and defend their own constitution and their own liberty, as Samuel Adams put it, they don't deserve sympathy. They've earned contempt. He said, if therefore a people will not be free, if they have not enough virtue to maintain their liberties against a presumptuous invader, they deserve no pity and are to be treated with contempt and ignominy. If the people...
Okay, what's that mean? That means that people that can't stand for it and just allow it, in other words, we're giving up our rights, we are not to feel sorry for them. You're a victim of your own demise and your own vices. In other words, actions have consequences. I'm not fighting for you. I'm fighting for me and my children and my family and my future. And it's almost, and it's a, yes, is it selfish? Yes, 100%, but it's a good selfish, because you're doing this to protect you. The others benefit from when we exercise our rights. Now, I'm going to share this next one, and then we're going to get into the judicial immunity. This is a caseworker, okay? It's going to blow your mind. And it's going to share with it, it's going to tell you everything we already know. But this is her admitting what it is that CPS and caseworkers do. Take a look.
It's crazy.
I was a CPS social worker for 10 years in Kansas. And one day my supervisor and I were having a conversation, and I don't remember what started it. But essentially what we talked about was that we could take information about anybody's family, and spin it and twist it and make it so that it fit criteria for removal of their children into foster care. That if we just cherry-picked facts, cut and pasted facts, twisted facts, we wouldn't necessarily have to make anything up. We could just twist them around. We could have that family meet criteria for removal of their children into foster care. Now, we were not having this conversation as some kind of power trip. Nothing like that. Nobody in their right mind would brag about being able to do that. It was a conversation about how much power we as social workers had over families. 2 years after I stopped working as a CPS social worker, I was investigated myself by CPS and the police, and that rigid control of the narrative, that cutting and pasting of facts, that cherry picking and twisting is what did me in. It was what I could not overcome. For service providers, step number one is recognizing how much power and control you have over the narrative that impacts vulnerable families. And step number two is using that power that you have wisely, accurately, and fairly.
Wow. Wow. What do you say to that? The states have empowered social workers so much. They have the ability. Our Constitution was meant to restrict exactly what she's talking about. Nobody has that power, not even the president. None of that stuff. Why? Because of the Constitution forbids it. But until we exercise our rights to do those things, it's not going to happen. Now, I'm a little blown away. So let's kick things off with judicial immunity. Now, I'm going to share this with you guys. And no, it's not another video. I just wanted to get you guys caught up with some of that as we usually do. I want you to look at this. Owen versus Independence, and there's the case law and everything else. Officers of the court have no immunity when violating constitutional rights from liability, for they are deemed to know the law. Once again, Hopperstrom versus Hayes, right in there. The courts are not bound by an officer's interpretation of the law under which he presumes to act. In other words, they're kind of quantifying and separating quite a few different things here, to where we're saying this is where we get into some of the division of their individual capacity and their official capacity as we go through. Now, everybody knows, well, you can't do this, you can't do that. Well, now I'm going to make an argument of saying, one, the immunity part is one, it's never found in the Constitution. You challenge them. Okay, well, I'm talking about the Constitution that gives you your powers or limits your powers. Show me on the Constitution in 1983. And they're going to run off to, well, there's this, well, there's that, well, there's the 11th, there's this amendment, no. That gives you powers that they delegate to the states to do. That doesn't give you immunity. Now, we're going to get into something that a lot of you guys, and I want you guys to just really pay attention to this. Get your pen and paper out now. This is the time. Write down those case laws. If you need them again, speak up. And once again, if you're with CPS or you're with some state or government agency or something like that, follow me or watching this show. Once again, this is for educational purposes. I am an international freelance journalist with the IFPO. Yes, I do have my credentials. They're up all over the place. This is to educate people, and a lot of people that especially are in law enforcement, CPS, they are blind, they are ignorant, they don't know. But the problem is ignorance of the law does not negate your responsibility for breaking the law. It's just that simple, guys. One thing we're going to get into with a lot of these arguments that end this, and they're going to come up with case law. They're going to come up with this. They're going to come out. You want to end case law or arguments with case law? Go straight to the constitutional canons. And no, I am not Punisher, and I don't know what happened to that. The system is just going crazy tonight. As you know, here they try to block us usually after a certain amount of time or something. They'll start cutting in and out, or it'll fade me or lock me up. Understanding this too, that judicial immunity is a judge-made doctrine. It's not found in the Constitution. Number two, we're going to go into something called the canons, the constitutional canons. One, the judiciary cannot write an exemption into plain statutory text enacted by Congress. Who has the power to make laws? Congress. Now you're dealing with, when they did this, they violated the separation of powers. Article 1 and Article 3 of the Constitution. It's right in there. When Congress passed the Civil Rights Act of, say, 1871, and now it's known as 42 U.S.C. subsection 1983. This is where we get the 1983 from. In plain text, it says, every person who acts under the color of law, the color of state law, to deprive a citizen of constitutional rights shall be liable. It does not say every person except judges. It says shall be every person. So the fact that 1983, a lot of people will come back, you're going to argue, wait a minute, that's separation of powers. And if that's the rebuttal, well, you can't sue a judge in their official capacity. Hold on now. Show me where it says that in the Constitution, that you then challenge the judge back and forth in a brief, or even the court or the magistrate. Show me in the Constitution where that said in 1983. Matter of fact, it says this. That's part of your rebuttal when you get those challenges. It violates the separation of powers. The fact of judicial immunity just violates the separation of powers. And yes, I do have some notes. Now they say, well, there's this or this. Well, the state says that this is where we go into Article, once again, 6, Clause 2 of the Supremacy Clause of the Constitution itself. Here's the constitutional canon, guys. Constitutional supremacy in any common law doctrine, state immunity statute, or judge-made rule must yield to the supreme text of the Constitution and the federal laws enacted to enforce it. So judicial immunity is bullshit, because it's right there in the Constitution and it's right there in the constitutional canons. Horseshit. But they want to challenge you because a lot of these judges, magistrates, and other people think, well, we've got immunity. You better read here and let me educate you for a second, because one, you can't. And when we go with the constitutional canons, it said, well, case law said, and case law, go right to the constitutional canons. They're the same as the judicial canons. No matter what your opinion is, they must align with this. And then here's the Supremacy Clause. You can't do this. This is why Section 1983 was specifically enacted by Congress under the Enforcement Clause powers, Section 5 of the 14th Amendment, to curb abuses by state officials. Yeah, you hear that? Specifically including state judges who were denying citizens equal protection and due process, like your family court system. What does that mean? Well, we generally don't get up under this. We're gonna do this. We're gonna do that. We're gonna, on this. Now, the argument they have, a judge-made common law defense, and so usually use Stump versus Sparkman. cannot overrule or nullify an explicit federal enforcement statute of 1983. It's backed by the 14th Amendment. Going back to the constitutional canon. You can argue the case law, but let's end the case law. Let's go to the constitutional canons. But unless you put the court and you do a notice to the court of some of these things of how we're going to proceed, or I know your games or your guidelines, and you put them on notice, oh no, we won't be doing that today. We will be following the Constitution. And if you don't, basically it's an act of treason. Are you willing to put your life on the line? Because to go outside the Constitution is to war against the Constitution, which is to war against the people, which is an act of treason, which the penalty for treason is death. You got to put them on notice. Well, that's, no, I'm not threatening that. That's what the Constitution says. Read it. You swore an oath to it. You said you would uphold it. You knew when you took the job what the requirements were. Did you not? Because I know it was explained clear just when you said the oath. Because you swore an oath to it, and oath means something that's more than a contract, that's deeper than anything else. An oath, go look up what an oath means. And then you've got, let me go through this Constitution, because some of this goes into some of the Latin and everything else. Expressio unius est exclusion alteris. The expression of one thing is the exclusion of another, joined with the plain meaning rule. In other words, the canon dictates that the constitutional and the statutory text must be interpreted according to its plain and literal meaning at the time it was written. In other words, you'll see this a lot, especially in a lot of cases. They'll go back and say, well, we don't know what it meant. Well, let's go back to the Federalist Papers. What was the intent when it was written? That's where we get a lot of that stuff. What was the context it was written? That, and the same thing goes where they say, hey guys, there's a lot of things out there that, this doesn't work, that doesn't work, but we've got to get into, what did it mean during the time it was actually put out there? Okay. In other words, what was its intent back in the day? That's why you'll get that argument. Well, Second Amendment only applies to cannons and muskets. No, it meant all firearms. Once again, we have to look at that. Those were the weapons of the day. And you're going to go into all this stuff and you're going to say, whoa, well, now wait a minute. Well, what does that mean in modern? In other words, take the context of that discussion or that law and modernize it. Oh, now it means this. Yeah, now it's something completely different. Now, I'm going to tell you what a lot of other people have been dealing with, and you guys need to pay attention to this one too, because this one's pretty bad. This is pretty messed up. I got another video for you. And this is what they've been doing for a lot of us pro se sui juris people, trying to get records and stuff, and when they want to do FOIAs and this and this and that, a lot of them are for cover up, is the fact that they've been pricing us out of it. Hey, I don't have any money, but I need body cam footage, or I need these records, or I need that records. Well, guess what? Now there's a cost associated with it. And now they've gone, check out this story. This is exactly what we've been talking about right here.
Does government transparency come with a price tag? That's the question being asked right now in Claremore after some folks who requested records wound up with sticker shock.
1,750, I believe, was the final total.
That's how much the city of Claremore told community activist Amber Robinson Rodriguez it would cost in order to produce body cam footage from the arrest of Darren Blanchard back in February at a meeting about the Project Mustang data center.
I think there's a lot of concern here whether our public officials are doing things in accordance with law.
Blanchard, like many others, got up to speak to officials. He apparently went over his allotted time and in conclusion asked to give some documents to the officials.
They brought the police in, said, get him out of here. And he said, okay. He willingly put down the mic, went up front and said, okay, I'm done. And they arrested him.
The arrest stunned many in the crowd, including Amber, who was there.
I was appalled. I was very surprised. I didn't think he would actually be arrested.
Blanchard was charged with trespassing, and his attorney has also requested the footage, along with a comprehensive list asking for virtually everything and anything related to the incident, including the council's history of removal of any attendee. The city's response? That'll cost you $17,125.44. Blanchard's lawyer told us the fees quoted by the city of Claremore are astronomical. Not only is the city of Claremore effectively discouraging the average individual from seeking information about their government, but they are also intentionally hampering Mr. Blanchard's defense by denying his legal team reasonable access to this information.
We reached out to the city for comments, specifically asking, quote, whether the city views these costs as excessive, punitive, and a deterrence to the public seeking information. Their response? In accordance with standard practice and on the advice of legal counsel, the city of Claremore does not comment on pending or ongoing legal matters.
When he actually got booked into jail, I was shocked.
Amber, meanwhile, is considering passing the hat to raise funds to get the footage.
The whole point is holding people accountable.
In Claremore, Burt Mumolo, Tulsa's News Pulse.
Wow. That's 17 grand to get records to fight against them. That is ridiculous. Completely ridiculous. I just can't. I can't comprehend. I can't even believe. Those are public. There is not, to me, once again, Freedom of Information Act. Once again, they found a loophole. Well, it doesn't include cost. You tell me what cost on body cam footage, everything else, 17 grand for somebody that a kid in high school or middle school can spin up and put on a flash drive or a disc or anything else. That is ridiculous. 100%. Now, let's go into the next set of the constitutional canons that we've been going on that deals with all this, including judicial immunity. Now, there's another, the 5th and the 14th Amendment. Let's go into that. No state shall deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Not of policies and procedures, of law. Big difference. Now, the canon is ubi jus, libel remedium. Sorry, my Latin's a little off. Where there's a right, there must be a remedy, is what it means. The foundational canon of the Anglo-American law means that a constitutional right is a legal fiction if there's no mechanism to remedy its violation. In other words, when the judge abuses their authority, does this, does that. They did it with the full weight and backing of the state. Now, what do you mean with this? We have to watch in their official capacity, because if they're enacting something the state has passed, in other words, a code or a statute or something like that, and that's what they're following, or a policy or procedure that is unconstitutional, and the judge is following it, or magistrate. That's why you go to constitutional canons, and you don't just defer on case law because you can bounce it back and forth. But to end the conversation is, let's go to the canons. No more debate. Those are interpretations. Here's what the canon says. Does it align with all of this? It does not. We have a problem. Now, a lot of people say, well, that won't reduce you and that won't turn over your cases. No. If you filed something that says, listen, I'm suing on the fact of due process, there was no due process, there was a violation of my constitutional rights, there was forgery, there was perjury, there was this, can a federal court case override this? They can give a decision, they can put sanctions on them, they can terminate them, void them. There's all sorts of things the federal courts can do, especially if it was done in an unconstitutional practice, including your own case. If it comes down to something smaller, you could take that ruling and use that for what? For the appeals court, or go straight to the Supreme Court in the state to go, look, you were just a constitutional rights violation, overturned, void ab initio. Once again, it could take some extra filings, this, that, once again, you got to work the case. Once again, that's where a lot of people give up. They say, well, I've done this and now I've done it. And no, and generally right then and there, that's something you can request is, Your Honor, due to the extremities or the extreme nature of this and the constitutional rights violations, Your Honor, I'd like you to give an order and for it to be double checked by the court, so on and so forth, that those things that were done to me under the state and through these particular processes and by these people abusing their authority, that to nullify or void, but void it or nullify it to where as though it never existed, and seal it. You can ask them to seal. In other words, you got to have a federal judge's and put a federal judge's thing on that particular case and seal it. In other words, you can't even peek at it without getting a code from a federal judge to unlock it. And they do this all the time. You just got to take and deal with it. Now there's another one that you're going to deal with, the constitutional avoidance canon. Okay. But you apply it in reverse. Okay. Courts will use the canons to interpret statutes in a way that avoids making them unconstitutional. However, you can use principles of use. In other words, it's not always what's there. Sometimes it's what's not there type theory. In other words, don't always look for stuff in your case of the stuff that they just did. Also look for the things that they didn't do or the things that they are missing. In other words, requirements, canons, policies, where say, hey, it says you're supposed to do this. Did you do that? Nope, you didn't do that. Did you interview this? Did you do this? Did you make sure this was done? No, none of that happened. And going back into the biggest thing here, and this is where you burn them. And this is why it hurts so bad. Those that scream, oh, judges are immune, judges are immune. Aren't you the same judges that turn around and say, oh yeah, even the president is not above the Constitution? Oh, gotcha. If the highest job of servitude in the land is the presidency, with the most power, according to the Constitution, if the president's not immune from the Constitution, then the judicial branch sure as hell is not immune from the Constitution or immune from those things. And states that, and once again, implement these codes and statutes and so on and so forth, or these policies and procedures that are unconstitutional, they're every bit of them. Every bit of it. They did it with the power of the state, and you've got them doing it across the way. Now you go in, you ask, here's this happened in my case. This happened to everybody else across state. Why? Because they're following this policy and procedure, and you've got several victims. It just adds up. But now you're looking at the interpretation of a rule or a statute that leads to an unconstitutional or basically the absurdity doctrine also can be applied there. Result, it's got to be rejected. If Stump versus Sparkman is interpreted so broadly that it immunizes a judge who acts maliciously with a total lack of due process. In other words, I'm just going to break everything out there. I'm going to do my own thing, and I'm going to rule like a freaking tyrant. There's no remedy. It means you're above the law. And once again, that's unconstitutional. Nobody's above the Constitution. Nobody's above reproach. Nobody, and that's why it's such an absurdity. This goes under the absurdity doctrine. Well, judges are immune. No, because it's unconstitutional. And if the state's working on behalf of the state and the state policy and procedure, you're connecting and showing this is where they've been doing it, such as CPS policies and procedures that allow for this illegal crap to happen. Well, guess what? It all comes together, guys. Now, listen, we've been doing a lot, to educate you guys on a lot of things. Now, we've covered a lot of things with the Chevron doctrine early on. We talked about this. We were the first in the nation and internationally to blow the whistle on nurses and stuff going on in across the nation for stealing children, falsified drug tests. Now this is coming up. It's become a big national thing. Falsified drug tests. Matter of fact, there was even, I was watching an old show, Mythbusters. I don't know if you guys ever watched that. They actually proved that the whole thing with the poppy seeds on the bagel will pop, positive on a drug test. Matter of fact, they were the ones that broke the news nationally on this particular thing with drug tests. That's freaking crazy. I mean, it's absolutely nuts. But we've talked to you guys about the Chevron doctrine. We've talked to you guys about SEC versus Jarsky. And somebody did a recent video, and I know we've been talking about it over and over again, but you guys need to listen because he broke it down simple. Maybe sometimes I play some of this stuff because I feel that maybe somebody else's different perspective or the way they bring it across might bring it clearer to you guys. Because sometimes I do get in depth or I get a little bit over technical just with who I am. But here's one here that I ended up finding, and I want you guys to watch it and pay attention because it covers it and it does it very, 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 very well to turn around and explain the Chevron doctrine, SEC versus Jarsky, how it fits in real life. Watch the video. Well, come on.
Rights. Those are really the only two things you need to file.
Seventh Amendment rights.
To a magistrate judge, demand for a jury trial pursuant to the Seventh Amendment to the Bill of Rights. Those are really the only two things you need to file. And for those of you who are not aware of the SEC versus Jarsky case, that's where the Supreme Court says the reason we fought the Revolutionary War was for the stuff that they're doing today in our courts.
Seventh Amendment rights.
To a magistrate judge.
Okay, guys, right there for you guys in the family court, SEC versus Jarsky, I demand a jury. We're not giving you a jury. This is the whole reason we fought the Revolutionary War. You want another Revolutionary War on your hand or another Civil War? Give me my damn jury. When SEC versus Jarsky, we tried to tell you guys, well, you're not getting a Jarsky. You're not going to get a jury. They're not going to, you don't expect them to do it. File the damn paperwork, people. File the paperwork that says under SEC versus Jarsky, I'm guaranteed a jury, not an administrative hearing if we're going into this particular capacity. This is what you have to do. This is required of you. This is required of you under constitutional canons. This is required of you under state constitutional canons. You guys have got to look at those. A lot of people, case law, case law, case law, case law. Case law is only going to get you so far. Constitutional canons, judicial canons are absolutes just like the Constitution. Stop playing pitter-patter with them and end the argument. File the proper paperwork. When you file, don't assume, once again, even if you say something in court, make sure that you file what you need to file to back it up on paper, either before you get into court or right after you get to court, preferably before you get into court. And then you bring copies with you to hand it out and go, here you go. You're going to do this and you're bound by this. Well, the Chevron doctrine. Well, how does SEC Jarsky? Well, they say, well, I don't have to do this. But Your Honor, you need to read on there, the Chevron doctrine's dead. You got to just do as you're told. You have to follow the higher court's ruling. You don't get to interpretate. You only get to follow. Why? You don't have the power of that anymore. Chevron doctrine was overturned, but the courts are still acting as though they have that discretion. That discretion is gone. Objection. Well, that's my discretion. Objection, Your Honor. Objection over what? My discretion? Yes, Your Honor, absolutely. The Chevron doctrine's dead. It's been overturned. You should be aware of this, Your Honor. You realize by not keeping up with that or enforcing that change, you're getting ready to commit a crime if you haven't committed a crime already, which means now you've lost all jurisdiction and power because it's now on the court record and I will be filing this accordingly. You need to go read it and it applies to you. Once again, in a nice, calm, easy voice. No sense getting upset. This is how you communicate. Well, I'm not mad. I'm just going to give you the information of saying you're wrong. Now, you're going to hate that, but you also understand that also opens you up to civil liabilities and the possibility of you being removed from the bench, possibly with a charge of treason, because now you've gone against constitutional rights from some of these other things that you're doing or getting ready to do, which means now you're violation of your oath. And when a judge violates their oath and goes against the Constitution, they commit war against the Constitution and the people. And once that's an act of treason, which you'll have to be tried for, and once found guilty, you're to be put to death. Oh, well, that's insulting a judge. No, Your Honor. It's in the Constitution, and you should be fully aware of this, especially if you sit up on that bench. And I'll be filing this as well. This is why having something on the record, and you guys exercise your ADA to make sure that you get it, somebody there live transcribing, and make sure they're transcribing anyway under the ADA, because guess what? If it's filed under the ADA and they have somebody there that's doing all that and they have to record all that stuff and or do the live transcription as they're typing it, they have to record that to make sure it matches up with the audio. But you don't pay for a stenographer. Gotcha. And the cost goes on the state. Guess they won't tell you that, will they? No. So once again, this is just one of those things that if we know our rights and we exercise our rights, if we stand up and we won't be tolerated, once again, we have to be educated before we go into the courtrooms. And we're behind the eight ball, especially within family court, because they move so fast because it's business as usual. And they do it for a reason. So you cannot catch your breath because you're over here taking notes of, I'm just trying to keep up. Once again, you don't do this for a living. But once you get baptized in it, this is why people like, if you'll go look up Carl Miller or some of the other people out there that have won huge cases that deal with constitutional rights, and they know their Constitution and they go into the federal court and they kick their ass. And then they turn around and go, now come after me again. You're going to have a one big sign of leave that person alone. Why? Just don't do it. This guy's over here like Carl Miller tell a story. He'll say, come through. He goes, another person over here, I dare you to give that dude a ticket. Don't give that dude a ticket. All his superiors, do not do it. Rookie comes in, gives a ticket. He goes, oh God, what have you done? And even the supervisor, I told you not to do it. Well, he was doing it. I don't care. Leave him alone. Now he's going to take it. What? Why? Because he will fight it all the way to the federal court. And what they're afraid of is when he wins, especially in that state, that gives everybody else a case law using that case. And if you can articulate what happened in that case in your filing or in your scope, say, hey, I'm quoting this thing, and here's what I understand of how it applies. You now have to follow it because Chevron doctrine's dead. And on top of, where's my jury? Where's this? And now you're going into the other things and you're pointing all this stuff out. And then when it comes down to it, then they won't do nothing. Well, the lower court won't do nothing. Your case, well, my case is still up. I'm still locked out and I have to go through it. No, you don't. You simply file with the appeals court and you write a writ or a habeas corpus in there and you include that stuff in there. Judge doesn't have jurisdiction. They're holding on the case. They refuse to do it. They do this. They do that. Once again, you've got all these different things Can't do. Huge. But you got to know how to put it on paper, how to file it, where to file it, and the way to file it. And make sure you're arguing, once again, in the right jurisdiction and in the right courtroom. If we don't understand those basic things, let alone, and I know for some reason, like I said, this is a little bit low tonight. I know they're shadow banning the hell out of me on this episode because this is about judicial immunity and teaching you about constitutional canons. Oh, hell no, they don't want you to learn about this. Not in the least little bit. And I ran you through what, 3 or 4 constitutional canons that shut down that and take away all their power and authority. Oh, this is a constitutional canon right here, Your Honor. You should know these. And when they look them up, they go, oh, crap, I'm in trouble. Yeah, but until you articulate it, they're going to go in there and they're going to play stupid and say, what can I get away with and how much money can I make as fast as I can? Because that's what they do, especially in these family court cases. And you saw the social worker with the testimony that was here before. We had this kind of, hey, listen, lady, I got one thing to, she's over here. Well, we were doing, even though we wouldn't do that, no sane person would do this or that. Well, congratulations. Somebody else already fucking learned that lesson, ma'am. And they're already using it to what? Streamline millions and billions of dollars out of Title IV. They learned how much power they had to do this and steal people's kids. And this is exactly what they're doing. 100%. Ouch. That sucks. That sucks bad. Because now you've caught them. Because now you're in their world and they act like there's no recompense. They're never going to get caught or anything else. Let me tell you something. Especially if you live here in Blount County, Tennessee, let me tell you something. It is going down every month. There is something new. There is something being uncovered. Matter of fact, in Blount County, and I know James Richard, you're from Blount County, and I know you know this story, that a recent Blount County Sheriff's deputy was, I guess, something with a drunk, had her checked out over at the hospital, and then took her home in a cruiser up into Knoxville. There was, stuff of that going around, and then supposedly had sex with them so they wouldn't get arrested for a DUI. I guess this has been going on to where now they're, that same thing that's going on up in Kentucky, where that sheriff shot the judge that he was the head of the organization for running the brothel out of the jail. Well, it looks like Blount County, Tennessee has got something a little bit similar going on, but not exactly the same, to where now there's things are coming out about sex rings, swap parties, deputies, I guess venereal diseases going around for this particular person, jumping from here to here to here. And I guess there's some connection with that and some other people through here that have been popped up. Once again, not confirmed, but you can look on the internet through there between Tony Crisp, which is the city of Maryville's police department. I guess his wife has got some sort of relation to this Blount County officer. There's some sort of connection. For a sec, I don't know the exact details of it. I know a lot of that is going around. You guys are more than welcome to go down those rabbit trails if you're Blount County. But yeah, it's absolutely crazy. Well, Scott Spangler out there in Maryland, especially, they're not above the Constitution. You're fighting in the wrong thing. Once again, you have to get into their policies, procedures, show exactly what they messed up. No due process. SEC versus Jarsky requires a jury. There was no jury present. This was not done willingly. You didn't contract with anything. Those are the type of things that are seen in similar filings, as well as the Chevron doctrine being overturned, that they cannot loosely interpret things, that it requires this and that. I'll give you an example. For certain classifications in my particular state to use a certain code or a statute in what they wrote up, which they screwed up massively. Under one of them, if you use part 1, you got to have a doctor testify. If you use number 2, Well, you got to have a psychologist testify. That's a requirement for in there. Did they do that? Absolutely not. Yeah. So then you call them out. Hey, you failed to follow this. You failed. Matter of fact, in my particular case, I even went as far as going, you violated your own state's constitution. And nobody caught it. All of you. I mean, this is where you call them out for everything that's there. Even though you've had your rights terminated, you can still go to the appeals court and, point out all those things, that none of these things were done. There's no clear and convincing evidence. Clear and convincing evidence doctrine wasn't followed. You can point out the constitutional rights. And then when you do those things, listen, guys, when you guys are filing those things, especially the corrections and a few other things, put notices in there that you have the right to amend or change at any given time, especially with your filings. That way they can't kick you at federal level, state level. They have to give you the right to do that because you put it on your filings. Number two, is to make sure you put a notice, especially this serves as notice, that my intent to file a federal civil rights or a 1983, this thing, because you have to notify them. Once you notify them, and then it was put on the court record. Yes, it was put on the court record and it was notified. And then now I'm moving forward. Why? Because you have to notify all parties. So there's a process to doing all these things that you got to make sure that you follow. Guys, we're just gonna wrap up a few things here. It's a week. Hopefully you guys learned something this week, and you were able to take and draw something from judicial immunity. Okay. And it's found nowhere in the Constitution. Sometimes it's all about asking questions, not making statements. Make them hang themselves. Show me where in the Constitution it shows that there. Oh, well, well, now let's go under this canon. Let's apply judicial canons. Scott, I wish you the luck. A lot of this is personal cases, and you know your case better than anybody else, which is why, this is where a lot of people that do pro se sue jurists work. They begin to educate themselves on how to file, what to file, everything else. If you're at deadlines, you can file for a deadline extension due to, you can do it under if you qualify for the ADA, you fall it under the ADA, that you need additional time to do research and gather evidence. Those type of things. Then if you need stuff to subpoena, even in the appellate court, that you need to subpoena documents, you can put some of that stuff in there. Like I said, especially when you go to the federal court, it's a whole different game, because all of a sudden everything changes. And yes, you have to put the courts on notice. You have to tell them, we're going to do this, or you got to know their job and say, I know what your job is. And if you don't do your job, I'm coming after you. I'm coming after all your assets. I'm going to do this. I'm going to whack out your insurance. I'm going to put you on a Brady list. I'm going to make sure that, especially if it's dealing with children, I'm going to have you charged with criminal. I'm going to have the federal court report this to the federal authorities for federal prosecution. Make sure you get charged with crimes against children, especially with this stuff. It's rough. But your best proponent is, like I said, dig in. And if you guys think you missed a show for Gunning for CPS, just go on YouTube, man. Our channel, Gunning for the number 4 CPS. That's right, the number 4. And you can go back and watch past shows and catch up on a lot of the information and knowledge. You can even go back and watch the Jessica Saxon episode that we've had a couple of them here on Gunning for CPS. But I want to thank you guys once again for the great support, and thank you guys so much if you're in TikTok world. I have not figured that out yet. I've got my application in because I just reached 1K followers after being blacklisted for 3 years from TikTok. So we're trying to get on TikTok live there and drive these numbers all the way up and expose. I know people are thirsty in the TikTok world for this stuff. A lot of exposure. But I want to thank you guys once again for all the support. Without you, it wouldn't be possible. And guys, keep spreading your stories out there. Share them and get with people in your community and help each other, because you're going to work together, especially with those that have had the same thing. And iron sharpens iron type thing. Man, you guys could help each other out a whole lot. And that's what we want to do, is help educate keep you knowledgeable, and that way you can piss somebody off today, especially those that service in government, man. Hold them accountable. Thanks again, guys. We'll see you next week at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time right here on YouTube, Facebook Live, and hopefully TikTok Live if they'll let us next week. But thanks again, guys. Have a great week.
Still standing strong. Blount County CPS. The reckoning has only just begun.